Hello, everybody. How's it going? I guess yesterday was a pretty intense day with all the eye stuff. Um, there's just one thing we didn't go through yesterday. That was the positioning and rotation of the eyes, right? Like in relation to the head, because there's that whole thing about it's like if you model the eyes to look completely straight, 90 degrees, basically they're gonna look cross-eye, right? Once you render, more likely your model is gonna look cross-eye if you make like 90 degrees. It's kind of like there is this example I used before, which was a book in the 90s that was I think like 90s and 2000s, that was I think it's like Magic Eye or something like that. That was kind of like it looked like a fractal. So you would look at this image, just colors, and then you would like cross your eyes, for example, you would see something popping in 3D. Actually, the effect was kind of different. If you focus like in one point, like crossing your eyes, you would see the effect sometimes in a reverse mode. So for example, instead of seeing a pyramid, you would see a hole, right? And then as soon as you actually did the opposite, instead of like looking inwards, you would look slightly outwards, basically like defocus by looking slightly outwards. Then you would see the form popping out like correctly. You'd see the pyramid. And the way that I remember, like in the instructions of those books, they would say to get that effect of like looking slightly towards the other, it's like outwards a little bit. Basically, what you do, you put your book like slightly below your eye line, and then you look at the point or something all the way far from you, like in the it's like a mountain or something like that. And then you keep that focus that you have away from the book, right, far away, and then you slightly lift the book until you cover your eyes, right? So you're back to that image. Basically, like keeping that same focus in there. That way, your eyes actually are looking outwards slightly, and then you're seeing the forms the way they're supposed to be seen, which is much more difficult to train yourself to do that than actually crossing your eyes, because you know like how to cross our eyes. So that's the thing that happens. It's like the eyes, when you're looking farther away, you normally have a little bit of this slight tilt. It's like a slight rotation of your eyes. And we're going to be talking about this tomorrow, because we're going to be sculpting the eyelids and making sure that everything is pretty tidy around the eyes. And then we're going to be talking about like the rotation that I use, which is around like between 2 and 3 degrees. And that gives this impression that when you look at your character, it looks alive. It looks like it has thoughts, right? Like it's looking kind of like far away. It's in a different land, right? Like of thought. So that's the cool thing that adds a little bit of a soul in your character. It's like is to actually have either the model is the model looking slightly to the side, for example, so it's not like a straight thing. Or if you force a perspective, for example, like you render slightly, it's like looking up, something like that, and then you put the eyes like looking farther away, right? It's almost like that person is having thoughts, especially if he has a facial expression baked in. But we're going to be talking about this tomorrow. So today I want to cover this one here first, which is just this question here that popped at our forum, which was this one here by Leandro. And he's asking like, what's the it's like the logic behind this, right? Like what's the type of pores that you use in certain areas, and how to actually create the blend areas. I would say that is correct for the most part here, but I would say dense pore area, I would not consider this like a dense pore area. And then I would not consider this one pores further apart. It would be kind of the opposite. And I would explain why. So few to non-porous, that's correct. So basically, like you're gonna have the pores at the tip of the nose, which are basically gonna be mostly the bumps that you get in there. Sometimes like little pimples and lots of blackheads, right? Mostly, and then that broke up texture that I showed you guys yesterday how I do it. But when it gets to the side of the nose right here, then you're gonna start like some of the pores coming in and becoming slightly more spread out and turn into like blackheads, right? Kind of like around here, you're going to have still some pores in there. And then transition areas, I would not call transition areas those ones here, because this is just like the forehead. It's not a transition area. It's just like a different type of skin, right? Just imagine this, that the skin itself, if you didn't have anything, any type of movement or anything, like a baby skin, right? There's no marks or anything. It's just perfect skin. And you don't even see the pores that much, right? Like it's just like this super soft skin. As soon as you start emoting and having all those it's like movements happening with your face, you start creating those marks, right? Like those wrinkles. And as you age, your skin is going to lose more and more elasticity, and then those marks are going to be more and more baked into the skin. So you're going to be seeing them more often. And then when you get like, for example, like sunburn and things like that, right? All this stuff contributes for the skin to kind of like kill some of those cells and bake some of this information in there. So it's kind of like a memory of your facial expressions, right? That's all what the wrinkles are. But in terms of like the structure of the skin, I would say that the structure is the same all over the place. So basically, like, it's going to be the same kind of pore structure and everything. But what makes the difference is that exactly what I said. It's like, so for example, like in areas like the mouth in here, you're going to have like a different type of character for the skin, because you're going to see like those marks of it's like the way that it stretches because of the way the muscles move underneath. Same for the forehead, you have the muscles pulling up and down, right? And so we're going to have the marks in a different way. So you're going to have the vertical marks, micro wrinkles, and you're going to have the horizontal big lines, right? Because everything is pulling in there and over time marking the skin. Same for this area here that I mentioned around the chin, right? That everything is going to have this kind of like, it goes both outwards like that, kind of like almost like creating a little rays coming, radiating from the mouth, right? But then you have the lines that come like conforming to the contours of the face as well. It's going to create this crisscross kind of effect in there. And then the muzzle is based on the stuff I observe at least, it doesn't matter the age. That's basically like the last one that, it's like the pores is going to stay there for a long time, right? Even when you see the skin becoming like paper thin, you still can see some of the pores in the muzzle area for a long time. Sometimes you see like some old man, and you see like the skin is basically like you can barely see any pores because everything is wrinkles at that point, but you still see some pores in here in this area, right? But in terms of the transitions, I would say it's just like try to make a nice blend, like you already did a nice paint of the areas here of no pores, right? Or at least like very little. No pores around here. This is going to be mostly like wrinkles and some micro texture, right? Like the crisscrossing that I mentioned. But then when you get around this area here between the two of them, then you're going to try to imagine like that's a blend of the two things, but without competing with each other, right? So instead of like cranking the pores all the way to the maximum depth and cranking the wrinkles all the way to the maximum depth, you're going to start soften both of them as they meet, right? So you create this overlap that at the end they have like a similar amount of power. They just mix together, It's like, so you're going to have some wrinkles starting to cover some of the pores, and some of the pores like starting to dissolve and becoming wrinkles. So I don't have a formula for you how to do that, but what you can do is just look at those super high resolution pictures, and also the other stuff that was posted in our group. For example, this page here, right? That I don't remember who posted, but yeah, I don't know if it was Mid or someone who posted, and I have to check actually because I have this open for a couple of days now, and then you have like all those different areas, it's like showing the types of wrinkles and different ages as well, and then it's like you can look at those and see how this blend is happening in there. But I would say like that website with the super high resolution stuff, this one. That would be even better, because you can actually see how things are blending with one another. But I would say like just go after the information in this reference bank here, and I think you're going to be able to do it, create those transitions. Now back to what I was saying about the distance between the pores, right? That you mentioned like the pores further apart in the dense pore area, and I mentioned that's the opposite. I say that because what happens is like it's two things. The first one I mentioned is that the structure of the skin, if you had, for example, someone in like a very lean face without any fat underneath, right? Let's suppose like you have like a complete lean face, a young face, and there is no facial expression happening. I'm pretty sure that the distance between the pores and the structure is going to be very similar across the board, right? Like at least like, let's say, for the most part, in terms of distance and depth, right? In terms of character, obviously, you're going to have the micro wrinkles in different places and everything. But the character, the structure of the pores and the distance is going to be very similar. Now, if you have someone, for example, like this, like smiling, right? Or you have someone who had some accumulated fat underneath, right? So you have like those big cheeks and stuff. This is basically like, this is a stretchy kind of surface, right? So obviously, if you have like some, you know, it's like even if you have a grid applied that looks perfect all over the face, when you generate any kind of deformation and you inflate this area here of the cheek, obviously you're going to get some of the pores looking like they're more apart because there's a stretch happening in the structure. Imagine like this is like a rubber texture that's applied to the whole thing. And then you're just like flexing it. And as you flex, you're going to see those things getting more and more spread out. Same is going to happen around the muzzle in here. And then the chin. So those areas here, muzzle, chin, and then this area, the cheeks, you're going to have a similar kind of distance. But then obviously, if you have a facial expression like I have in here, more likely the cheek's going to have even more space between them because of the way that, you know, it's like he's compressing those areas here and creating this bulge in the middle. And then in relation to the muzzle is going to be slightly more relaxed, right? Although it's a smile, it's not like a super strong smile here, like not a laugh, right? In the case of a laugh, this whole area here would basically like this corner would be pulled back further, and then you would cause a stretch around this area here, and then you probably would see the pores a little bit more spread out. But if it's a neutral, kind of semi-neutral position like that, you just have to imagine, like, when you look at the model, what are the areas you see with more volume? You know, it's like a bulging out, right? You would see the cheeks, the muzzle, and the chin. And those ones you can treat almost like with a similar kind of treatment, you know, in terms of distance and the depth. But then obviously when you get to certain areas, that although you're going to have a lot of stuff going on here, you're not going to have a lot of wrinkles in this area here, right? Because these forms, they move kind of together. The wrinkle is going to start forming more towards the sides like that. But here you're going to have some micro wrinkles happening because of the flexibility of the mouth and everything. So you're going to have to break up the pores further here, keep them more intact around the muzzle and the chin, and keep them more intact in here. And then for the forehead, I try to make like the same kind of pores, even like similar distance, but just like shallower, because I want to mix them with the micro wrinkles. Going like both diagonal, horizontally and vertically, and if you try to sculpt stuff on top of other stuff, for example, you start with the pores and try to sculpt too much stuff on top of it at the same intensity, they're going to start competing, and then you're going to be like a very messy surface. That's why I sculpted them very faint around this area here, and now I'm actually covered with a different type of texture, so they can actually blend together. And then for the sides in here, because I was sculpting the wrinkles, you saw that I was using the clay build-up, because the clay build-up actually eliminates some of the pores as you sculpt. So that's the difference in there. But I guess that just like some tips in there. But the best reference is to actually look at the pictures. You know, it's like look at the photographs. Omid posted today a scan actually. There you can see a lot of stuff is around this area of the eyes and the you know, forehead. So, you know, use anything you can just like to clarify this kind of stuff. Yeah, my work is based, like, as you can tell, is mostly idealized, right? So it's not like although I follow a lot of stuff like to get the right information, for example, size of eyes and refraction indexes and stuff. A lot of this stuff is kind of like I go by feeling, you know. So it's not like I'm not too married with you know, it's like the real thing, right? Up to a certain point, yes, but after that, I use a lot of freedom to create my stuff. So let's go back here, and we're going to start doing some painting today. This texture here, as you can tell, is being reused. So I started with the stand just to have something to render, but this is not the texture that we're going to be using for this guy here. We're going to be painting one from scratch. So let me just hide this first. And the first thing you're going to do, I'm going to switch to our flat color material, so we can actually see how the albedo looks like. In the past, let me see if I can find here. in the past, you would look at this type of information, right? Like, which would be basically like a, you know, it's like a kind of like a photo shoot of someone like in a light stage or something like that, and they would capture everything as photographs. So they're gonna basically like they would create like at the end the model in 3D and a seamless texture that would cover the entire thing, right? But a few things that this texture doesn't cover is basically like the elimination of the deep shadows, right? And also the elimination of the subsurface that's baked into the skin, right? Because there's no way to draw, basically like to drain his face from blood, right? The blood's going to be there, and you're going to have all this coloring in there, baked into the albedo, right? So the first thing we're going to do when we are painting our maps, we're going to be eliminating this type of information here. We don't want to see anything like this, like those deep shadows anywhere, because that's going to be created in the render. We don't want to have any baked shadows. That can be very deceiving, including for the shapes of the face. If you have something baked in, sometimes you look like the form is in there, is actually not there. It's very deceiving. A great example of that is those amazing tutorials on makeup that you see, like, for example, like there are a couple of women actually that they transform themselves into all kinds of characters, including male characters like Al Pacino, you know, it's like Johnny Depp was, you know, Captain Sparrow, you know, and basically like they transform themselves using the same facial structure that they already have. They're not using any prosthetics or anything, but they are actually just like painting their faces to create fake volumes, right? So that's what's it's so important to me, is like to make sure that you're very true to the forms of the face you're sculpting, you know. As I say, you know, it's like, for example, in the studio, a texture artist can actually make or break your model, right? So if you get a good texture artist, the person is going to be enhancing the work you already did, and that's the best kind of a professional you can find to work with you as a modeler, right? Someone who can actually get your model with and push it to the next level, right? Like just like make it look beautiful and everything. And then you can be unlucky sometimes and then get someone who actually just going to slap kind of like randomly some textures in there just to add some complexity, and then going to be putting in like stuff like baked in shadows and not being very careful about that stuff. And then all of a sudden you render it and you see those things in dailies, right? And you look, I was like, oh my God, it doesn't look like the model. And I'm pretty sure I sculpted in a different way. And then you start tracking down, and then let's go, oh, okay, so let's eliminate all this stuff. You know, that's not okay. So texture is very important to actually create like the right volumes, right? That's why I try to paint everything by hand, because I that way I can actually be sure that there are no shadows baked in or anything like that. And everything that's in the model that you see, it's actually there, right? About the subsurface scattering being baked in, I already mentioned a little bit of that, but once you plug the albedo back to our model, once we have some versions of the albedo we can plug back to our model, I gotta be showing you how, the way that I'm actually eliminating this subsurface scattering, right? I think I already showed you guys, but I'm gonna go over that again. Basically what I do, because there's no way for me like to just imagine how the face would look like without the blood and the subsurface scattering happening, right? I would have to basically like try to imagine a very, very pale face to be able to do that. But then how can I control if that face is gonna look correct when I render, right? So my idea is, normally I try to use something like this as a starting point to get like a notion of the color of the skin, right? Or like this, if it's more tan, right? Something like that. And then I start that as my base color, and I paint all the way through using that color baked into my albedo. But then once I bring everything to Maya, I actually plug my albedo into a RGB, basically like it's a color correcting node that I use in Maya. I can show you everything. That I basically desaturate the reds and increase the blues. So I create like a more pale face, and then basically like at the end results should look something like this, but because of the subsurfaces combined with this desaturated map that I'm creating in Maya, if that makes sense. So basically like if it's not looking correct yet, I can keep desaturating and adding more blue to it, or or it's slightly more red. You know, it's like I can actually have control on the red, blue, and green channels, and I can actually create something that plays nicely with my subsurface scattering. Because at the end, we need a result like this. But if you simply plug a map like this without any treatment to it, you're going to be doubling the subsurface effect. So that's why you see a lot of times you plug a map like this and then you put subsurface and all of a sudden it looks super red, you know, it's like, or orange. It's because you're not actually removing it. I don't see a lot of people doing this. So I think this is a good tip, you know, it's like I mentioned this actually to a TD at work and he said, man, I never thought about that. And the guy has a lot of experience, you know. So, so I think it's a good, you know, idea. It works for my models. I think I have a lot of control doing that way. So, so this is the map I have, and because Stan had a little bit more of a tan skin, I actually went a little bit more orange than I would go. And I'm going to be basically like painting a very basic map today and refining as we go. And in terms of the techniques, I'm going to be showing everything that I'm using here, like microveins, all that stuff. And then as I paint, you know, as I'm going to be describing the areas, why I'm painting, and adding certain types of tones in here. And then basically, like if I'm painting something else after the class, it's going to happen because I need to get this model finished in a week and a half, or maybe a little bit more than that before the other class starts. So I'm going to be speeding up a lot during like between Thursday and Monday, Thursday and Sunday. But then in terms of techniques, I'm going to try to cover everything I'm doing today. And then after that's going to be basically repeating the same stuff to get the same type of effect in different places, right? So let's go over this. So to start here, this is the model with the baked in texture from Stan. We don't want that. So let's just like, as a matter of like just making things easy for us, so we don't need to reinvent the wheel, let's do this. So let's start with the standard brush. You're gonna just like smooth it. It's just RGB. So I'm gonna crank at 100% here, my RGB. Just very quickly, I'm gonna just blend this together so we can actually pick a color easily here. Let's pick like an average color for the skin. Again, like it's a little bit of on the tan side, but we can pick a color around, let's say like here. So I'm gonna pick this color here, and we're gonna start with that color. So if you wanna copy it, it's gonna be different for your models, obviously, but this is the color I picked right now. So it's 185, 138, and 107. If you wanna plug those numbers manually, you can go to coloring here. You can just type it in there, right? So 185, 138, 107. So that's gonna be a base color. So I'm gonna go to my highest resolution. And especially like if I want to really bake everything and start fresh, I think I'm going to go HD as well. So let's do this. I'm going to go HD. This area here, because I want to make sure that everything is painted at the highest level. What happens is that, for example, like if you paint anything here, for example, if you flood the entire thing with this color right now, it's going to basically like flood everything in the non-HD levels. But a lot of information that I have painted at the HD level is still going to be there. It's actually going to create a blend between the two of them. So you see like I smoothed all this area here. Let's see how it looks when I go to HD. If it's going to be smooth completely, or some stuff is going to be still in there, you know. Let's see. So I have that. And then if I get really close, actually the smooth worked fine. But if I painted texture, sometimes it tries to average between the levels in HD and the non-HD ones and create some artifacts sometimes. But in this case here seems fine. So I'm just gonna create a solo in here. So that's basically everything is HD, right? 35 million polygons. And I'm gonna just flood it. So I have my color selected. I'm gonna go to color, just switch to RGB, not mRGB, because this one includes the material, right? M is for material. And if you do that, you're gonna be baking the material, which in this case here is fine. If you bake the flat material, it actually just resets any material you have baked. So that should be fine, but go for RGB, 100%, because if you keep it like low intensity, it's gonna bake just that amount back to the model, not 100%, right? So let's go 100% and then color and then fill object. So now that's completely plain. Let's go out of HD. In this case here, I mean, like you guys should not have anything painted at this point, so you can skip all those steps I'm doing. I'm just making sure that we're starting completely fresh with this model. Now I'm gonna do for the ears the same. some eardrums in there. And then this area of the neck. What did I hide something else? Yeah, I hide this one. Okay, so this entire thing here, let's do let's go HD. Just gonna bake it again. So fill object. Just make sure we are 100% plain color, nothing else, completely fresh. Oh, well, this one I can actually just do this. Let's just paint manually. You should be fine at the highest level. We can actually double check, but it should be fine. It's a little bit of, I see a little bit of it in there for some reason. Let's do this. And try again. Let's flood it. Object. Looks good now. And this part here, just to make sure. Oops. ZBrush. Okay. And then let's do it again. So that's all flooded. So now let's start like with some coloring. Oh, actually, it'd be good if I did like for the cavities and everything. Let's do that. Let's get this, and this. So the lips and the inside of the eyes and the carunculus as well. Have some other areas here. And then the bottom part. Let's revert. And then let's just flood this from here. It's fine. If there's any trash in the highest level, I can deal with it. So now we have everything plain like that. Let me switch back to my startup material, which is basically like the material I showed you guys yesterday is the default material, the basic material from ZBrush, just with some tweaks in the material specular. Like if you go to material modifiers, so I made the diffuse from 80 to 100, changed the not the diffuse curve, but the specular curve. So the specular curve I changed a little bit like that, looks sharper. And I think I have a little bit of wax as well. So wax modifier, yeah, I'm gonna bring it back so I don't have any subsurface in there. So that's basically like a modifier version of that. So now I can see the model with the plain texture, right? If you want something a little bit more on the skin side of things, you can switch to the skin shader like that, but you don't see a lot of the details, so I don't like it. But I like the startup material of this one, so I can see the shadows and everything. So I'm gonna start like by saying that in the past I would see some tutorials of people using different approaches for painting the skin, and one of them was to actually use an approach that was very similar to what people used at as practical effects guys, right? So they would use like paint like very strong tones, and they would like basically cover layer by layer and leave a little bit of those tones underneath to simulate some kind of translucency in the skin, because they didn't have access to that. For example, if you have like a fiberglass model or latex or something like that, you might not have the same subsurface stuff. So you're gonna try to simulate some like veins underneath and stuff like that. But nowadays with the shaders so powerful, when it comes to subsurface scattering, you can actually, you don't need to worry about that. You can paint the colors straight away without too much concern about simulating anything, because basically Arnold's gonna simulate the stuff for you anyway. So I'm gonna be starting like to add some coloring right now. I'm gonna start with very low intensity. So if I go back here to around like 3 for the RGB, I'm gonna start picking some reds in here. Let me just switch to a reference because I'm not even looking at my reference right now. Let's just look at the, let's see. Let's get the ray and then some references in here. And I see my references are very, I don't have a ton. I got actually some reference yesterday. Thank you for sending it to me. Those ones here at the top. But you see like his face is a little bit tricky, right? Because a lot of times you're gonna get pictures like this that's more like a kind of incandescent light, and then some like this, it's like they're more like daylight. So I'm gonna try to find like the daylight ones and trust them more than stuff like this. I'm gonna try to trust those ones basically like color calibrated for daylight, which should be around like maybe like 65 100 Kelvin or something like that. So I think I'm gonna trust this type of skin here, even here, because there's a flashlight, and the flashlight should be calibrated for daylight as well. It looks very kind of pale in there, so it should be kind of like that. And then I'm gonna just put one of those. Let's see. Let's start with this one here. Yeah, this one here. Let's start with this one. I'm gonna put on the side, and see if I can do this. I hate to actually use just part of ZBrush right here, because it doesn't allow me to select this stuff from the menu very well. But I gotta put them. This is the reference. If you want to save it to just have that as a reference, that's the reference I'm gonna use. But I'm gonna put in the other monitor here because it's gonna bother me with the menus. So I'm gonna just put it in here, and I'm gonna be referring to it as I paint. And I'm gonna be describing what I'm doing as well. And like I said, if you copy that image, that's just for your own reference. So I'm gonna start with some of the reds. I'm gonna go switch in here. And I normally try to get, instead of like getting something super saturated like that, go full on red all the way to the right side. I go like to a desaturated version of it. So something around here. So I'm gonna get that red at 3%, right? So that color is similar to something like this, like red 138, green 81, blue 64, just as a reference, right? But you see it's a pale red, and it's kind of on the dark side of the red in there. So I'm not HD yet. I'm gonna paint a lot of stuff here in the non-HD levels first, just to block my colors first before I go further with like detail or anything. So I'm gonna start with these eye bags, and just gonna add some coloring here. And you're not gonna see much right now because my shader is very deceiving in here, right? But I want to be able to see where I'm painting, because if I simply switch to this, all of a sudden I'm not seeing what I'm painting, right? So basically I have no reference of anything. So I'm gonna paint some of the detail first using that those colors. And then I'm gonna be switching to that mode so I can continue on it. So for his nose, normally like if you get like those normal Rockwell paintings, right? You're gonna see like the red noses of like Santa Claus, right? Someone who just had a little bit too much wine or something like that. So you're gonna get some redness in there. In his case here, his redness is more towards this area here, because there's a lot of micro veins and blood vessels in this area here that he has pretty strong. So I'm gonna just add a little bit of redness just as an indication in there. I'm gonna move towards the cheeks. I'm gonna have some more blood flowing here. Again, like very like small intensity. And then as I switch to the next levels, I'm gonna be blocking and adding more colors, and I can actually switch for good to the other shader after I have some stuff in place. So for the ears, although you have a lot of subsurface scattering actually creating the redness around this area, if you have the ears sculpted just thin enough, they should scatter and become red in there with the backlight. I still want to bake a little bit of the redness in here, because there's a lot of vascularity, it's like in the ears. I mean, like you can see, for example, like if you sleep on top of your ear, right, like against your pillow pressing it, you see how red they get. It's like you have a lot of little blood vessels in there. And then especially like inside here, I can add a little bit more of a redness in there. So what I'm doing here right now, basically like I have this color that's the base skin color. As you can tell, it's not like a super pale color, right? It's kind of like in between. I like to have a color like this because that way I can actually bring up the color with like using very pale colors, pale whites and pale whites, like full whites, or pale or oranges and yellows, and then bring them down with colors like this, like slightly kind of like the saturated reds and stuff like that. So I'm gonna go to the lips in here. I'm just blocking at this point all those colors, right? I'm just like adding them, so I have like an indication of all these positions in the model when I switch to the other shader. Just gonna have it there. When I get to the inside of the mouth, maybe I can just unhide the whole thing. Actually, do something like this so I can actually have access to it. And I can just paint the entire thing in a certain color. For the inside, instead of like going with that color, I'm gonna switch here to flat color, and I'm gonna pick something slightly more on the pinkish side, right? So I go all the way to the side there, and I'm gonna paint something like that for inside of the mouth. There you go. It's pretty like rough right now, just like blocking some of those colors. And then as I get more towards the, I have this alternating here on, I'm gonna turn it off. That's one is gonna, you can mess up if depending on the stuff you're doing. If you're doing some of the spray brushes, you can actually try to mix the two colors together. So this point here, that's basically what I have in there. And I'm gonna start like coming back with the same color and just like painting a little bit inside. And I have like this stroke here that's like with lazy mouse. I'm gonna turn off the lazy mouse. I didn't realize I had it. So I can get a little bit more of that. I'm just gonna, you know, paint and cover this area a little bit more. The inside in there. If you wanna make sure you're not like going in like in thin structures like that and just like going kind of like through the surface, you can actually turn on the back masking in your brush. But I think the color here should be fine. It's just if you're sculpting, you probably would see stuff going through more easily, but the color should be fine. Let's go here. Just like at this point, just really blocking, right? Just make sure I have some of that stuff painted in. And then right now you can see like all the colors are completely flat, right? There's no variation or anything. It's just like a kind of like a airbrushed, right? There's a cheap airbrush, right? So there's nothing super fancy about it at all. But the depth and the complexity starts happening when you start adding, you know, everything applied as a spray with different settings. And I'm gonna be showing you all the stuff that I'm using to create that effect. So for the lips, he has like the lips is slightly towards this color here. That's a little bit more on the pinkish side, right? So RGB intensity at 3. I'm just gonna add that. Sometimes you get a little bit more of a blend, right? So get like more of a blend that goes down, like very pale here, but I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna keep his lips just around there because that's what I'm seeing there. And anytime I can just like click here, the color picker, and then just go in any area and then pick the color again. So I use this a lot if I'm trying to blend two colors together. I just pick an average and then I use that to merge it. But in this case, I'm gonna just pick around here and then just gonna tweak this little dot in there. So just paint it back. So let's go back here. It's a little saturated in there, but it's okay. Let's basically like go back, pick this color again for the inside of the mouth, and I tweak it slightly to go more towards the red again. And you can tell like I never go towards the right too much unless I'm sculpting some veins and stuff. It's normally more towards the saturated side of every color I use, which helps with realism most of the time. So the last part here I'm gonna do is probably gonna be like maybe a little bit more on the cheeks now that I can actually see where they are. Actually gonna go back to 1 for intensity. I'm gonna keep it super low. They're gonna just blend a little bit. You see, like it looks a little bit dullish, like a a super cartoonish in a way. It's just because we are just blocking those areas, right? Just adding some of that. So you see, I just picked this color again, and I'm actually blending it back a little bit. So I'm gonna go to towards the neck. I'm gonna pick the color again, tweak it slightly, and then at 1 intensity, I'm gonna add some more in the neck. Sometimes you get like sunburn in the neck, right? So it's nice if you're painting later with the, with your brushes, you can actually paint using cavity if you have the wrinkles already baked, but I don't have them yet. Then you basically can use those wrinkles to create the impression that you're creating some sunburn, making sure that the wrinkles, they're not getting sunburned. So basically like use the wrinkles to block out any burn, right? So you're gonna have the redness just around them, and the wrinkles themselves gonna be pretty pale inside for logical reasons. So so now that I have those colors kind of like blocked in place, right? I can see where things are. I can even block maybe the nostrils in here so I can actually see what's going on. If I can see the nostrils, yeah, something like that. And even add some color inside. not by much. I can actually remove some of that. Just block them first, and I can actually blend. So I'm gonna pick this color again, the general skin color. Just blend it again, just especially around this edges here. At least I can see where the nostrils are now. And I mean, like, nothing stops me from at any time just switching back to this material, right? So if I don't see anything, but at that point I'm actually okay with it. So let's start blocking some colors in here. And so normally what I use spray for most of everything when I paint. And that's basically the same explanation I had the other day when I was painting the little example of the specular map, which is like intensity and size variation for the spray brushes, right? So I have this one here, Untrue Skin Color. And let me show you the settings. So basically what it is just like the standard brush. If you duplicate your standard brush, you can just plug, it's like a spray in here. The settings are pretty much default. So like flow is 25, color, I don't want to mix any colors, so I'm just gonna bring it down. If you have this color mix in here, basically what it's gonna do is gonna try to alternate between those two colors, right? And I don't wanna do that. So I'm just gonna bring this one down. So there's no blend. Scale at 1, placement at 0.5. I believe this is all default. And then for the alpha itself, I'm using like something like 35 or 36, something like that. You can pick, let's see, 36. Oh, not 36, I guess 37. And then for the, let's crank the intensity all the way up. And let's pick a very bizarre color here so you can actually see what I'm doing. Let's try something like that. It's very dark. So basically that's what's doing, that shader, that combination of spray, right? It's doing something like that. Obviously, you're not gonna go with that full intensity, right, to create anything like that. But we're gonna use this to block out some of the color from now on. And I'm gonna be trying to use spray for the most part from this point on. This is just like the broad spray, so I don't need to go HD just yet. Let's just bring it down to, let's say 2 for intensity or 3. And I'm gonna try to find, again, those spots. So again, for example, like around the cheeks, I'm gonna start adding that with a very low intensity. So I'm going around here, right? And you don't need to worry if it's getting too dark in certain spots because we're gonna be lifting all those colors very soon. But just to add like a layer, that's kind of like a deeper layer of variation, right? So I'm playing with the size of the brush. So at any time you're gonna see me doing this, right? So like a bigger brush, just get the broad ones like that. And then I'm gonna go back to a smaller version of it and then go as a kind of like a secondary layer on top of that. So slowly you're gonna get a little bit more variation, right? So you're gonna be adding that. If you never did like color painting in ZBrush using polypaint, sometimes people get very timid. They don't wanna add too much variation because they think like it's gonna look too weird in the renders. I would say go to town, It's like don't be afraid of adding variation because there's a lot of way you can just like lift those colors later on. And it's better having more in there and seeing what's doing than actually chasing it forever, It's like trying to be too conservative about it. So let me just like add these variations in those areas. And his skin is pretty pale, so I'm gonna be, like I said, like lifting a lot of that stuff later. But for example, around here, the muzzle, he has some more color towards the sides in here. And then some whitish areas, maybe the nose a little bit more. So very, very simple step right now. So it's kind of like I started with the plain color, right? It was just like super simple. And now it's slightly more complex, but not by much. It's just like, it's still very simple what I'm doing here, right? There's no secret or anything. Now we're gonna have some more coloring here. So keep adding some more variation. I'm gonna turn off my symmetry so I don't have too much stuff going on right here, like too much repetition right in the middle. We don't want that. And I'm gonna turn on symmetry every time I wanna go towards the sides of the face, right? Because I wanna save time. I don't wanna paint everything twice. I'm gonna keep doing that. So now we got a little bit more color variation, right? So at least we can see what's going on around like the sides of the nose. I'm gonna add a little bit more color as well. So a little bit more redness, right? And then slowly gonna start building up the forms, not the forms, but thinking about what's underneath this whole thing. And then that's going to include like everything, like the blood vessels, the, you know, it's like the fat pads and whatever you can see in the reference. And then this guy's going to have an extra layer of difficulty, but I'm not going to go that crazy because he has all those crusties in his face, right? And I'm not going to do that because first that would be very mean to model someone with some illness, you know, like, or some skin disease in there, or maybe like a skin cancer or something. So I'm not going to go that route, but I'm going to try to capture a lot of his liver spots. Like old people get liver spots, right? So I'm going to try to get those guys in there, not so much those scabs, right? I don't want to do that to the poor guy. So let's go back in here and let's start adding some color variations now. We have some stuff like pretty much blocked in there. And let's say I want to block some of the lighter colors now. The lighter colors, I try to paint them already in HD mode because I want to capture some more complexity. So I'm gonna just like switch back to non-perspective, and I'm gonna just basically like unhide just my mask, the one I always use for the HD. Gonna get all that stuff, the eye bags, and I think that's about it. Let's get the carunculus too. And that's about it. So that's basically what I'm going to be sculpting HD. So let's go HD. And then as you are in HD, just try to imagine that everything you paint in HD is going to be baked with the HD maps, right? So that means you're going to get a ton of information in there. And that means like if you're using like 8K maps, multiple 8K maps for all those parts, you can get like very super detailed stuff sculpted in here. And those maps, when you export using the multi-map exporter, all this super tiny information is going to be baked as well. So let's go back here to the eyes now. And one thing that I noticed with those older folks, they get like this very pale, it's like a coloring underneath the eyes, the eyebrows here. And then and also his muzzle is very pale in there. So I'm going to start lifting some of those colors, the overall coloring, without putting any like information that's too specific right now. So it's just like another layer of things, right? So I'm going to be switching. So I'm going to use the same type of stroke, right? But I'm using the alpha here that was 37, I believe that I picked, right? 37. I can actually pick this guy here now. That's like alpha 7, right? So let's see what the alpha 7 does. So if I crank the intensity here very high, so that's the kind of effect that it gives me now, right? See that? So it's basically like it's a tiny little micro dots, right? It's great to add like a, like some rust, like in the face, right? Like some of those freckles. So I'm gonna be using it to lift it and to bring some colors up, especially the lighter colors. So I'm gonna go towards the white in here, not complete white. I'm gonna switch more towards yellow and between yellow and orange around here. And then slightly to the middle in here, something like that. And I'm gonna switch to intensity, maybe like, let's see, 6, if that helps. And I'm gonna start painting some of that. Just let's try in this area here, because that's basically like the area you're gonna be painting anyway. More pale, right? So basically like, let's get some of that in there. And then let's start like adding some of that around the nose. You can see the tip of the nose here. Adding some of that discoloration, right? It's almost like it's again, like I do one pass with a small size for everything, and then another pass with this slightly bigger size. So if I switch the sizes here, bigger like that, and I do it again, I get a little bit more of that kind of more broad effect, right? Every time you're painting something, try to do this both things. It's like at all times, like you switch between big and small and change the intensity. You have to add some variety to the texture, right? Otherwise, it doesn't sell as something that's alive, right? Like a living thing, like a skin or. So just adding some of that to create some lifts in there. So he has some of the discoloration around this area here, like I said before. So let's see, around here. So I'm gonna turn off I'm gonna make even less intense, so maybe like 2 or 3 for intensity. And I'm just gonna paint around here, his muzzle, around there. And then I'm gonna go towards the forehead, and it's also very pale, but has all those liver spots, but I'm gonna just paint pale for now. Just lift some of that, just by using some of this lighter color, right? Gonna go around the side here. I'm using a very low intensity now at 3, right? So just like to add some of that skin variation to try to blend things together. So get that, and then you can see like it's almost like the skin is a little, it's like a cold day, right? You get the little blushed in there with little dots of white. Gonna go around here, add some more of that. And then let's say we're kind of happy with whatever we did. It's not the case yet, but I mean, just like showing you what I'm doing, right? Again, like very important to remember, like use like a switch like between different intensities. Like if you're using 3, for example, for the broad ones, so I'm using like 3 for the very big brush like that to create the bigger variations. You can go a little bit higher and then a little bit smaller. So every time you do that, you add more complexity. And it's almost like there's a multi-layers of things happening, right? Like it's almost like the different variations are coming from different layers of the skin from underneath. So it's very important to keep adding those variations and not being too shy. At this point, I'm still shy because I'm just like mostly blocking things. But as we get more specific, we're gonna start to get a little bit more bold with the detail, right? Have to go bold with it. Now for the eye bags in here, let's switch back to this material. Let's say maybe skin shader, and let's see what we have here. So we have the eye bags, and for me to, in order to see the forms in here, I'm gonna have to zoom in and actually look at this without that flat shader. I want to do this, for example, like for his eye bags, you're gonna notice stuff like, you know, it's like this is not a great example. There are better examples in there, but you see like there's some yellows in there, some yellow color. You know, it's like some fat pads and tissue underneath. Slightly more on the bluish side around here. You're gonna notice in some people with light greens as well. You're gonna get a little bit of greens. Everything has to be applied very desaturated in a very, very thin layers, right? And then make things blend together as you go. But I'm gonna try to introduce some of those values in here now. So let's gonna zoom in his face here so I can see what I'm doing. And then I'm gonna switch like between this little alpha 7. I'm gonna go back to my 37, which is basically to create a little bit more of a broad kind of spraying, right? It's not so much of a little too clear like the one I have right now. You can actually see the dots, but something a little bit more diffuse. And I'm gonna pick a color like this one. So for example, I have yellow. Maybe I can switch a little bit more towards the green, very slightly. And then a little bit more saturated. For the intensity, I'm gonna use something very low, like 3. And I'm gonna be working symmetrically in here. So just gonna be painting some of that stuff. Let's just mark some areas here I can actually see when I switch. Something like that. And then I'm gonna make it very kind of like almost like spots in here. I'm gonna just be painting them, those little spots. And then let's just switch to see what we get so far. So we see like have those spots right here and right here and right here, which actually are the fat parts, the folds, right? Like the fat folds. So basically, like it's almost like there is some it's like under structures happening there. So for example, like the fat pads or fat deposits around those areas, you're gonna be seeing them shining through the skin, right? So basically, like what I'm doing is just like basically like showing them. Actually, I had the symmetry on. It's fine. I'm gonna add a variation later. But now I can actually crank the yellow slightly more towards the saturated side. And I'm gonna saturate a little bit more yellow right here. And then I'm gonna start adding some yellows around this area before I add some blues as well. Just gonna add some more yellows in here. And because I'm not using that super crisp little detail, this one should help to blend stuff as well. So I'm gonna be expanding it towards this area here on the sides and up all the way close to the eyebrows. Maybe painting something a little bit lighter like that. At any time, if you want to blend stuff that if it's too different from the rest of the skin, just remember you can actually sample, right? Like just click in here and then pick a color that's kind of like an average color, and you can go back in there and just like repaint that area slightly until it blends together with the previous color. And it's cool because he adds another layer of, you know, it's like paint on top of that. So if you, again, like if you're using a variation of intensity and size, you're going to be able to create some nice effect in there as well. So for the eyelids, we are not quite there to do it just yet, but I'm going to be showing you what type of color I would pick for the eyelids. So let me just add some yellow right here first. Right there and here. And then let's see the eyelids so we can actually have a reference in here. So for the eyelids, I would pick something like, let's say like a slightly towards the red in here, but not quite pink, right? But then a very desaturated version, like something like that, almost gray, right? So something around here. And then I can crank the intensity, maybe remove the spray because I don't want to see, I want to see like a more plain color happening here. And I'm going to just paint a little bit more of a flat color. Maybe it's a little bit on the dark side, so I'm going to go a little bit lighter than that, something like that. Very desaturated, as you can tell. I'm going to turn off the symmetry so at least I know what I'm doing here. So I'm going to paint that area. Obviously, if you want like absolute precision, you can always hide stuff, right? And make sure you're painting just what you want to paint. But in my case here, everything is very free form. It's almost like I'm painting a physical object. So I'm just like going with it, with whatever I can see here. And then if I need to tweak later, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start with a color like that. And then obviously I can add variations later. But I'm going to start with a very desaturated color. That's like I said, like it's almost like a, between gray. It's like a tinted towards pinkish gray, right? But it's mostly gray. Because this area here is super thin when you render. And when you render this area here, the subsurface scattering is going to turn everything very red. So you have to imagine like how those colors play together with the subsurface scattering, you know. Obviously, you can always use masks and different maps to filter the most scattery areas from the others. But for the most part, basically, like I use a combination of the color to help me with, you know, using the subsurface. So I'm going to go to the other eye. I'm going to paint around here. Let's see over there. I hear birds. I'm going to mute everybody, right? And then, okay. We are almost actually at the time of questions and answers if you want to, but not quite. Let me just finish this part first. And then from here, we're going to start painting more and more detail and showing the other brushes as well, including like how I do the blood vessels and things like that. And also the stubble, right? The stubble is pretty cool because the stubble is a combination of the actual groom. So we're gonna start doing some grooming tomorrow, right? Like show you the basics. But my whole approach for grooming is basically like I try to groom as you have it in real life. So for example, I can start sometimes like the groom with long hair and then I shave it. And then in the settings, when you shave, for example, if you're cutting the hair, you can define, you can tell Maya like in XGen to just like keep a minimal amount of length. So I can just say like, okay, I want this amount. And then when you shave it, you actually get a stubble in there. But I also like to have some of the stubble baked into the texture just to create the impression that the scatter has some ingrowth stuff in there, right? So I paint a lot of that in there. Let's switch back to here. So you see like I have very desaturated color in there, but now I can start adding some more, gonna make a little bit lighter than what we have in there. So I'm gonna switch a little bit more towards the saturated version here. And I'm gonna just add very slowly with a little bit less intensity, a little bit more lightness to it. So just to add another layer of things. I can even add my spray back and then just paint it back and try to blend slightly with the skin again. I think I went a little bit too desaturated. It became too gray. So I'm gonna have to tweak a little bit here. Add a little bit more of that. Oh. Right, I think we are good to talk if you guys want to ask any questions. I think, yeah, I went too dark here with this stuff. I'm gonna just have to repaint a little bit. Right there.
One more time, can I ask?
Yeah, hello?
Hello.
Hi.
Yes, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm fine, man. I'm still wondering if you can use the cavity mask to paint some cavity stuff.
Oh, you can do that if you want. I normally don't use it. I use the cavity map, like I said, like the cavity mask, just to actually, when I have like some burns and stuff, then yes. But like just for wrinkles and stuff, I don't use it at all.
Yeah, because you said that looks fake, right?
Oh yeah, like I mean, like the result produced by Arnold is so good, you know. It's like it really goes into everything, and I like the.
Sorry, I think this is addiction for the game acid, probably.
Probably,
because
yeah.
you need to fake everything on the surface of the texture.
Yes, exactly. Well, I never worked in games, so I kind of like. I don't know, but I know exactly what you mean, like, because I see some textures painted from time to time, and it's almost like it's used less textures, right, and more yeah, like
less pass.
Yes,
we have less everything, less polygon. Yeah, okay, but yeah, I know what I like the approach that you're showing, even more in the HG mode. Because you can make it a very subtle detail.
Oh yeah. For example, like you see, like this spray, just by using this variation between this spray with this alpha, and then switching between this one and the alpha 7, you can get those different effects, right? So right now I'm painting right here the eye bags, and you can see like it's almost like I said, like sometimes like a cold day, you look at your skin, you have those little lighter areas showing through, right? And it's all done like with this very simple process, you know. It's just a matter of like using the pressure. So this is the thing that you guys are not seeing here, right? I'm using the variation of pressure. It's hard to actually show say everything I'm doing, but basically like I start like very, very low intensity. And then if I want more whiteness in certain areas, I press it a little bit harder around here, for example, right? But yeah, it's just a matter of like you have to add variations like in your pressure and your color and your sizes, right? Just to get more of that. And then anytime. Sorry, yeah.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you use some projection in ZBrush for that?
If I use what?
Projection.
Projection for what?
To get some textures, the photorealistic pictures and.
No. I mean, like I don't mind if you guys do it. I don't use it for those models at all. It's just like everything is hand painted.
Okay.
Yeah, I like the challenge, you know. It's like try to reproduce something I see and try to recreate, because with everything that we are doing here, everything is another layer that helps with the realism at the end, right? You can say that none of any of those passes I'm doing so far, like including the pores detail and everything, none is absolutely realistic, you know. It's like if you get them isolated, but once you put all the pieces together, they start looking more realistic, because it's a combination of stuff. So I have the breakup of the skin variation now with the color, and then I'm gonna have the breakup with the micro breakup, right? That's gonna be breaking up the surface. I have the displacement maps. It's a lot of different types of you know, it's like variations added on top of each other, and at the end the result actually shows. But yeah, if you isolate everything I'm doing, the process is quite simple. It's just like it's just a repetition of the same, and using things in a clever way. I mean, like I use very few tools, as you can tell, like very few brushes, and I just add some variations by changing the alphas and changing sometimes the distance and the placement for the flow and the placement for the sprays. But it's basically like a few brushes, you know. But back to this here, around this area here, we're going to start talking about the different types of under structures, right? So for example, if I have like a cartilage, like I mentioned yesterday, or fat, right? I'm going to be adding some lightness to the texture. So for example, like around this area here and his lips, it's almost like when he smiles, the lips actually fold in and cover his bottom teeth. So when he does that, there's a pressure that happens around this area here. So you can observe that in certain people, that you look at this. Let me just bring the photo in here. And then you're gonna see there's some kind of like lightness happening right here. Sometimes it's more obvious, you know. It's almost like there is a pressure happening between the gums and the teeth, pressuring the surface of the skin in there. So when you have that, it's good to bake in anything that's kind of like you can imagine that's pressing against the surface. You can imagine that the blood is actually getting away of that area, so it can basically create the impression of pressure and compression, like in those areas, by just adding those colors. So I'm just gonna switch here to my trusty yellowish, slightly towards the green, right? Maybe a little bit right here, the saturated yellow, and intensity very low, like 3. And again, I'm gonna just add some of that color around here, very light, just to add a little bit of that, you know, pressure in there. Same I'm gonna do here, because he has this very strong cartilage, right? If you look at the model itself. So he has like, you know, it's like this divot right here. So right here at the cartilage, I'm gonna start adding a little bit more lightness in there. So I'm gonna switch back so I can see it. Just to reinforce that there's something underneath it. You can even crank the yellow a little bit more, so it looks more yellow. And then obviously if it's looking too white, sometimes, like I said, I pick the color back from the skin and then I blend back. But in this case here, we're gonna be doing a little bit more here towards those big wrinkles, right? Just gonna reinforce them in here, because I wanna make sure he reads like the surface underneath is pressing the surface, right? So we're gonna do that. And then especially around here now, all this area here is gonna be very whitish first, and then we're gonna go a little bit towards the blues when it comes to the corner right there. But all the way to the sides here, I'm gonna be using this type of yellowish, because like I said, like there's pressure being applied, right, from underneath. In this case here is basically the eyelid underneath is adding some pressure in there. And in this case here, the eye bags is the fat underneath. And in the case of the nose, it's going to be the cartilage. In the case of this, going to be the gums and the teeth, right? Thinking about like what's underneath the skin when you're doing that. Same is going to be for the bridge of the nose, right? You can get a little bit lighter in here. And obviously you're going to have the blood vessels later, but underneath you're going to have a little bit lighter like that, and then the blood vessels on top of it. Same I'm going to try to represent around here, right? So it's almost like the bone here underneath in the skull is pressing that area. So I'm gonna get a little bit lighter. In this case here, if you wanna use some cavity, you know, paint by cavity, later you can actually add some nice effect of having some redness in here and get some sunburn, you know, it's like, so the wrinkles are pale, but the rest of the skin is pretty reddish in there. So let's switch back in here. So now we start getting this type of effect, right? So we get a little bit more under the lips, around here, around the top of the eyelids especially. Very, very pale in this case. Both for him and Stan as well. Stan had a very tan color, because I think he faked tan. And, but also, you know, it's like, although he was fake tan, I mean, like this area was also very pale for him. So I don't know if it's like something about the way that the, you know, the fat distribution there happens, or it's just like from being like underexposed, right? Because, you know, it's like he's using the shade from the eyebrows constantly, so it's got kind of like more pale. But it's almost like, you know, it's almost like a rule when you look at those older dudes, the white dudes, of course. Like if you're talking to someone with a complexion, right, a little bit darker skin, sometimes you're gonna get the opposite, right? You get Indians with very, very dark skin around the eyes, for example. and eyelids are very dark. This is an interesting question that came up like in the past class. That was, you know, it's like you're doing all those white dudes, but then what about like if the skin is a dark skin? How you calculate? You know, it's like the subsurface scattering and all this stuff. And it's a hard one to crack because I was looking at some papers, some scientific papers, and what they mentioned, and I never thought about that, is that this the skin is going to scatter in a different ratio if you're comparing someone with a natural high concentration of melanin, someone with naturally darker skin, and someone who is fake tanning, for example. In the surface, they might look exact the same color, but the scatter is going to behave differently. You know, it's like the scatter is not going to penetrate as much because of the, you know, the burn of the skin, I suppose. You know, it's like it's not like a natural occurrence in there. So you're just like basically sunburning your skin. So the scatter doesn't look the same, doesn't work the same. So that's another thing I never thought about. You know, it's like both people can look exact the same when it comes like to the color of the skin, but one is going to scatter more than the other one, which is, it's weird, but it makes sense, you know. I'm going to point you guys to that paper that I found, and it was posted in the other group, but I can point you to it, and you can see for yourselves if you want to read like medical papers and stuff. But it's not very fun, but you know.
I really wanted to know how to create this kind of skin, because the next dude, maybe I can make the Malco wax or something like that.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to have this knowledge.
Yeah,
this is super cool.
Yeah, it's hard, man. Like to, you know, it's like there's so many variations, right? And even like when it comes to anatomy of the face, sometimes like we just say like, oh, because the face is, you can say like, oh, it's always like this, and you're gonna be wrong because at some point you're gonna find someone who has something that challenges the convention, you know. Same with for body types.
Hey Chris, the King Kong, you did the look that as well?
Which one?
The King Kong.
Oh, for King Kong? No, actually, it was just a model.
You didn't make the textures.
No. I helped with the like at the test phases. So basically, like we did the tests in there. There's a bunch actually of different studios competing to get the project, and we did our little test in there. And then I helped with that test, and then we got the project. And I modeled the character, and I modeled that last monster that he fights at the end, the big one, the skull crawler. But yeah, but sorry. Yep.
No, you think the skin probably have the same different behavior with the scattering because it's more dark.
That's a good question, because one thing that I noticed is like that. Of course, I cannot get too much into details, but at least I can talk about stuff that was already public information. It's that you know, it's like ILM, they use RenderMan for everything. And although I think the renders are getting very close to each other in terms of the way they behave, I still trust the results in Arnold a little bit better, you know. But I mean, like the ILM, they actually help to create RenderMan, right? Like, so they have like access to the stuff, and they change things, you know. It's like they help to improve the shader constantly. So I'm pretty sure like if you give them an idea in production, they gotta try to implement it. So it's like, it's pretty cool, you know. But I have no idea how they create like how the shaders work. I never worked with the shaders at ILM at all.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So now we have like established some coloring here, and you see like this stuff I did, it's just like simple steps using just spray. I can get some interesting color variation already, but I don't have anything too specific just yet, right? But I still have things a little bit on the boring side. So let's look for some oranges now. We worked with the reds. We did some pale yellows, right? Let's do some oranges now. So I'm gonna go towards the more saturated here, a little bit more towards yellow, a little bit more saturated here. So something like that. And then I'm gonna keep my intensity very low, maybe 1 or 2. So let's do 2. And I'm gonna look here in my reference, and I'm gonna start adding some oranges around the nose in here. Gonna go towards the cheeks, and everything is in very thin layers, right? And always using a spray from now on, never like a plain color anymore, because I want to make sure things blend together in a nice way with variation. I'm gonna go towards the side of the head in here. Keep doing that. And then add some more here in the cheek. So that's kind of pale orange, right? And around the neck. And obviously I cannot paint much here because I mean, I don't have the rest of the neck in there, right? But eventually I'm gonna get to that and then try to just like match what I did in terms of detail because it's non-HD at that point. But okay, so I think we are good with some oranges in here, just add a very, very subtle variation to it. So let's switch to some a little bit more weird here, which is gonna be something more towards the purple. So I'm gonna go towards down here, almost like bluish purple. I'm gonna desaturate it as well to something closer to gray. And I'm gonna add a little bit of that right around this area here. Now, obviously, depending on the type of character you're painting is gonna have like different variations, right? But this is kind of like common for like older folks. Sometimes like, or most of the time I use like some slightly purplish around here, but not a strong color, like just enough, you see, like just to add a little variation in there, but without being too crazy. I'm gonna do a little bit of that as well on the side of the nose, but very, very, very little pressure around here. And even maybe around here, this blend area between the lips and the skin, gonna just add a little bit of that variation as well. So you see, like it's a very, very subtle effect, but it really adds to it, you know? So we're gonna get that subtle, slightly purplish. And then at any time you can actually blend back, like I said, sample the same color again and then blend back. And then for the lips, I'm gonna be picking the same color I have already for the lips. So I'm gonna just sample that, click the picker in here and then drag all the way, right? You pick that color and then you can actually go lighter with it. And maybe slightly more towards red and orange than you had before. And I'm gonna use a very, very faint color, like a 1. And I'm gonna try to lift this area here slightly. Very slightly, maybe like 2 would be good. So I can actually see more what I'm doing. Okay, now I can see it. So you can see I'm getting those little dots now around the lips in here, which breaks that boring look of plain color, right? Just adding some variation in there. Actually, this color bleeds a little bit further for him in his case. So I'm gonna pick the same color and gonna make it bleed up a little bit more here. Maybe even more intensity, maybe 3. Just get a little bit higher than what we have in there. Always with spray, right? Yeah, always adds this very organic feel to it, especially for his skin. It's like this very organic mix of things. All the way there. Still on the dark side, I guess, but let's move on to something more fun, like blues, for example. And you're gonna see if I'm adding a color like blue or green, you have to go like intensity of 1 because it's like it really picks up fast. So for example, like if I wanna go for some blue, I'm gonna try to get a blue that's not like full blue like that, but more like towards blue-green. Almost like in between in here. Slightly desaturated, right? And then 1 for intensity. Actually, I'm gonna go lighter than that. So gonna go more towards white in here, something like that. And I'm just gonna pick this area in the interior part of the eye. I'm gonna add a very, very subtle pass of blue in here. This extra pale skin in there is slightly bluish. So I can add even a little bit more of green. It all depends on the reference, a little bit more saturation as well, because I'm seeing a little bit more green here. So it's starting to pick up now, so that's good. A little bit more towards the top. And if it's too white in here, like I said, I can always blend things back at any time. So I'm just gonna add this blues in here. All those colors, once we have them mixed with subsurface scattering, the scattering is going to actually make them a little stronger, right? So sometimes you have very subtle in here, but once you render, they start like showing up a little bit stronger. So I think the intensity we have in there is actually really good for what we need at this point. So same thing is going to be around this area of the bridge of the nose. In his case, it's going to be very desaturated greenish. So I'm going to go around here, make it very pale and greenish. Turn off the symmetry. Incorporate more towards the wrinkles in here, so like underneath the wrinkles. And I'm going to start going down the nose very slightly, not much, just a little bit. And then a similar treatment I'm going to do for this area here of the muzzle. So slightly bluish in his case, right? Because it's a very pale dude. Oh, and by the way, I was thinking about like who to sculpt the next class starting in 2 weeks. And I thought at first to sculpt Frazetta, right? I mentioned before, but Frazetta is not a very recognizable face. I mean, like unless I sculpt the old Frazetta, but his eye, I think he had like maybe a stroke or something. One of his eyes was popping out. He was very weird at the end of his life. And I don't want to be mean to those guys because they're my heroes, you know? If I sculpt the young Frazetta, I think people are not going to recognize him because he has kind of like a generic kind of face. He could be like some other actor, something like that. So I was thinking about the whole plan that I have for you guys, right, in this class, which is to have to give access to you guys to all the classes, to all the 3 classes without any additional cost, right? So for example, if you paid for this one, I'm going to give you access to the first one of May, and also to the next one, which is July, right? So if I keep doing like old dudes like that, you're probably not going to get much more information out of it. So my ideal for the next class is actually do a female, and especially like a young female. So I'm going to be sculpting my wife in the next one for the month of July. And then I can use that as an excuse for them as well, because I keep picking like older people because we have so much fun with pores and not pores, but like the wrinkle stuff, you know, it's like in those big forms, which is always more rich. We have more stuff to talk about. But there's a lot to talk about, like how subtle forms are important as well, and how hard it is to nail, for example, like likeness of someone who doesn't have a lot of forms, you know, it's like stuff you can hide, right? Thinking as a mini challenge to myself as well, and trying to avoid divorce by making her very pretty. No, it's a joke because she's very pretty. She's the prettiest woman I ever met. True story. So I'm gonna be sculpting my wife, and then you guys gonna have a double bonus, right? Like you're gonna have like an old person here doing this entire class, and then you're gonna be able to see the videos for a younger person. What's the different approach? You know, it's like how I'm gonna be approaching the pores and wrinkles, for example. We're gonna have to be much more subtle. I'm not even sure how we're gonna be approaching it, but I'm gonna do it.
And I think for the grooming tasks, I think you have a lot of challenges as well, because
the long hair.
The long hair is a big stuff to do, right?
Oh yeah, I like challenges, man.
Yeah. And by the way, thank you so much for this extension of the bonus.
Of course, dude. Yeah. I mean, like, I'm trying to support you guys too, you know. It's like, and the thing is, like, if you're seeing this, it's not like you're gonna be buying the next class because I'm gonna be like 90% is gonna be the same, right? Maybe the subject's gonna be different, and it's almost like in my mind, it's like, okay, I don't want to sell you something, and then if I come up with a different idea, for example, to improve some stuff, that you guys are not going to have access to, you know. So it's kind of like what ZBrush does, you know. It's like they keep doing the upgrades, but then if they create something cool, they just like give it for free because they think like, okay, the person already has I'm not going to be charging it. So it's the same, you know. I'm going to give that one to you guys and think about like the next classes if I'm going to be doing the same, but at least like those 3 ones, because this is like I never did this in my life, you know. It's like I did a class like 6 years ago, but was with the school. But I never like streamed live to anyone like that. So it's a brand new experience to me. I was talking to Scott the other day in private, and I mentioned to him that I'm kind of like a hermit, you know. All the stuff I do at night by myself with the headphones blasting music constantly. So I do this stuff quite fast, you know. But for you guys, I have to break down everything. So I have to think things through. I have to think about what to say. I have to have like a real-time translator in my mind, because English obviously is not my first language. So there's a lot of challenges. And at the end, I have to create something that looks cool, because I want to prove a point to myself that I can actually do one of those portraits every month, you know. If I was doing this by myself, I would probably reuse a lot of those textures instead of like painting everything from scratch like I'm doing here. But I want to make sure that you guys are getting what you're paying for. So that's why I'm doing it, you know. But if it was really a fly on the wall thing, as was my original idea, I would be reusing a lot of stuff, because that was the whole intention when I created my models. It was to be able to reuse as much as possible, so I can do portraits much faster, you know. But that would not be fair with you guys, although that was my idea. Over time, you know, it's like after the first week, I think, of the first class, I realized that, okay, if I do that, a lot of stuff's going to be going over their heads, because they have no idea how I'm doing it. And because everything is already kind of, you know, it's like I'm used to it. Some stuff, it becomes almost like abstract to you guys if I don't sit my butt to actually come up with a little methodology I can actually tell you guys, you know. So it became more like a mentorship, I suppose, than it was supposed to be at the beginning. And I think it's fair, you know. I think the price, it's not a absurd price. Like, there's a lot of much more expensive stuff out there. But, you know, the level of information that I pass is a lot of stuff. You guys are going to be rewatching those videos for a little while to capture everything, I think, you know. So now let's get some of the juicy stuff. Let's start doing some specific stuff, right? So for example, if I'm going to approach some of the veins, right? For example, another thing I can show you here, for example, I have this one. I already show you how it's broken down, right? The stroke, this skin color spray thing. But I have another one that I saved here that I called, let's see if I can find it. So I have the intro Stubble. It's called a Stubble, and have a Stubble better. For some reason, they call it Stubble better. Number 5. No, it's a Stubble. So basically, like the Stubble, it is the same Alpha 39, but actually I brought it down to something very, very tiny. Let's see how much I have it here. Is it 39? Let's see if it's actually 39. How can I check what the alpha is here? Because I don't think after you apply it, if you can see it. But it's just this brush alpha in there. Let's see if I switch here, which one, if it makes difference. This is 40, so it's not 40, definitely. Yeah, it's 39, so alpha 39. And then for the stroke, I'm using the spray. Again, like the flow is 0.25, and then the placement is at 0.5, the scale at 1, and color 0. And then if I switch to something like a gray, dark gray, let's do not black, but close to black. And so very dark around here. And then let's just switch to intensity a little bit lower than that. Let's see 30, so you can see what I'm doing here. So if I do this, you're gonna notice like it's very, very small, right? Like I don't have a lot of detail in there. I can actually go further with intensity, like maybe like 40, like I said. And then I have basically like the way I have it set up, it paints and sculpts at the same time. So it creates like those little dots in there, like an ingrowth like that, but I'm not gonna be using it. I'm probably gonna use just the RGB. And then let's see what type of result we can get with the higher intensity. So like a 50 something. Still too intense. So I would get like maybe, I want it look like more like it's an ingrown kind of hair. So I can actually, oh, another thing I can show you. So for example, if I'm just sculpting with, let's see if I have any lazy mouse. Yeah, I don't know. I don't want any lazy mouse. Yeah, without lazy mouse, I get more of the result I'm looking for. So this is a little bit too thick and a little bit too big, right? And then in based like the way it's spreading out, I'm just applying everything in circles like I normally do, right? Just like doing little circles like that. But if I want to do something that's a little bit more spread out, you can play with this amounts here. So this value is here, the placement and the flow. If you crank the flow higher, you're going to get more of those dots. But if you put all the way down to 0, now you start getting a little bit more interesting result. They are more spread out, so you have more control. So what I'm going to do here, because of he's an older guy, you can barely see any of those. I'm going to use like a lower intensity, maybe like 30 like that, just to get a little bit of that baked into the color. And I'm going to make the size of it smaller as well. So I'm going to get like smaller. And then I'm going to start adding some of that around here, just to have something in there. But his stubble is going to be actually what's going to be doing the entire thing. So I'm going to just bake some of that. If it's too strong, I can come up with the color, the skin color again, and then just cover it again. But you see, like I'm applying everything in circular motions, right? And trying to control the pressure as well. So I'm going to bake some of that. Obviously, if you're trying to do something that's accurate, like to the T, right? Then you would have to basically like have some of those little dots match the pores that you have, right? But what I'm doing here, I mean, like it's not gonna destroy the illusion that looks real at the end. It's gonna actually help to increase it. I don't think people are gonna be looking for the pores matching those little dots, you know. So let's keep doing that for a little bit here.
Chris, can I ask you something?
Yeah, please.
Oh, so do you think we can use this workflow in the industry? Because I think it's like pretty fast, you know?
Yeah, I mean, like I don't paint stuff at work, for example. People use Mari in there, but I definitely use for my personal work, right? And then for I would say like if I was in charge, I wouldn't mind if people knew how to do it this way. If they would do some of that work, for example, not for humans, because in the industry, most of the time we're going to use scans and things like that, and they would try to clean up because they want to make sure that everything is perfect, right? But for painting creatures, I mean, like this whole workflow would work for me. And I was like, if you're painting like an orc or something like that, instead of like relying purely in a photograph, I would say like, you know, it's like you could go a little bit more free and add some of this stuff. And sometimes you don't get pictures that are completely usable, right? So if you know those techniques, for example, just as fillers, both like sculpting pores manually, sculpting or painting your textures manually, I mean, like those things can be used as fillers to help you out, you know? Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. So you see, like right now, I'm going to start adding some more pressure. So I'm going to add some more pressure, just to get some of those dots in here a little bit more visible. And then I can go back and just like remove the symmetry that I had before, and then go a little bit more subtle with the pressure again. And then when I go back to the side, I can start like with the medium pressure, and then maybe increase a little bit more towards the middle in here, right? And then keep going in circles, always in circles. I'm actually, it doesn't look like, but I'm actually doing those lots of little circles, right? Like that's the way I'm painting. Instead of like going a straight line would look like this. This is a straight line painting, right? Just like that. But if I do in circles, I can actually cover a bigger area and make those little guys blend better. So just like circles and circles. And if I feel like one area is a little bit more empty, I just go back to that and more circles. And then I start like very, you know, it's like low intensity like that. And then I can pick one area, go a little bit more intense just to get some of those dots a little bit to show up more. But, you know, just lots of little circles like that until you fill up something that looks like the density would be something believable, you know. We don't have a way to measure how many points I'm putting here, but for example, like in the past class, we are looking at the amount of hairs that someone has in the scalp, you know, it's like, and would be between like 100 and 150,000. And then if you consider like the entire face with beard and everything, maybe the beard alone and mustache would have at least like something close to that, maybe like between 80 and 100,000, you know. So I don't know, right? So basically, like this is an estimate. This until I feel like it's something that looks kind of believable, you know. So we're gonna go with that. Everything is very, you know, it's an artistic approach. Everything I do, so it's like the final result might look very realistic, But there's a lot of freedom in everything I do, and that's the only way I can keep this entire thing fun for me to do. It's like it's very tiring to just copy, things to look like exactly like the subject, right? Like by using scans and everything. We do this like daily at our jobs, right? Like a lot of us are professionals here. So to me, I don't feel the necessity of repeating that process. I'd rather challenge myself and give myself room for like freedom, it's like of creating something, because that's when I think our style can shine through. Each one of us is gonna find a different way of sculpting pores. You can see like the examples. We are looking right now at our group, for example, how we are looking at the exact same videos and we are getting very different results, right? Because each one of us, we are basically like sculpting a pore in a different way, the way that we think is correct. And that's how you observe everything. It's like you put a live model in front of you in a group of 200 people. None of the drawings going to look exactly the same. Some are going to look much better. Some are not going to look that great. And at the end of the day, some are going to look more stylized. Some are going to look more realistic, right? But at the end of the day, what's going to be more artistic? It's hard to tell, right? Because like how you measure what's more artistic or not. It's very subjective, right? Like you see like a lot of crappy art being done these days for a long time, right? And there's kind of like there's no more concern with artistry, it's like to actually figuring out and observing the world and trying to emulate those things, but without being too anal about it and using too many, it's like a specific material to do that. Because otherwise, imagine like if everybody was using the same textures over and over again, right? It would look like everything would start looking too much the same. But if you're sculpting the pores yourself, and you can see the difference between the models we are posting, it's like that's going to be basically like a echo towards the rest of your work as well. For example, like the way you're going to approach the lighting, maybe you're going to have to, it's like your preference is to have like a backlight in a certain way. Maybe you like the backlight having a little bit more of a tint, like a slightly more towards purple or red. And then when you're going to start doing your renders for multiple models, all of a sudden people are going to track that. It's like they're going to see like that your preference for lighting is always with the light in a certain position, for example. And then all of a sudden you're going to start building your style in all those things. It's like in lighting, in texturing, and the way you approach everything. And then slowly people are going to start kind of recognizing your style in that, So I think that's the important thing to do. I would hate if everybody was doing exactly the same thing. And I know that this class is with intention of basically like teaching you guys, or at least exposing you guys to very unusual ways of doing things. But at the same time, it's something that produces results, something that you can actually apply practically to your work. And it's going to depend highly, of course, like to your skills and how you're going to apply it and how you're going to exercise. Because if you just expect like the information to, it's like to just like burn into your brain and all of a sudden like you're going to be doing it straight away, it's not going to be like that, because it takes practice. It's like as everything in life, right? You're going to learn guitar. You're not going to be good, just after doing one class with with Joe Satriani, right? You're going to have to practice a lot. And like we say in Brazil, eat a lot of beans, right? We say that in Brazil, you're going to have to eat a lot of beans and rice to become good at anything, right? Like it's just practice and many hours of study.
Hey, Chris.
Comer muito feijão com arroz.
Yeah, feijão com arroz.
Chris?
Yes.
How you doing, man?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. You said that you sometimes use this Stubble brush
Yes.
at the same time that you're painting, you're sculpting, right?
Oh, by default, I had it set to sculpt, actually. Instead of like sculpting up, I was actually creating some kind of ingrowth. But in this case here, I'm just sculpting them without that, because I think I have enough detail with the pores. I think it should be fine,
But if we have the HD geometry, should be better if we do this with an elastic brush.
Yeah, you can do that with the elastic brush, but I think it's like if I'm actually carving them to become these little ingrowth hairs, I'm not caring too much what's underneath. I'm actually really trying to poke the surface with it, But But you can experiment, for example, if you want to preserve everything in there, you can do it with elastic brush too.
Awesome, man. Thanks.
Yeah, yeah. It would be nice actually to test it, you know, it's like start with elastic and then do the exact same settings I have in here, flow at 0, color 0, scale 1, and placement at 0.5. Pick the alpha 39 and then just tweak it to make it very sharp like that. And then just experiment with it. But you have to find probably like the right intensity for the elastic, otherwise it's not gonna quite work. So now I have a lot of this covered, and like I said, like in his case, it's gonna be very, very subtle because he's an older dude. I don't want him to have like this super strong stubble. But you see like how well it works, you know, it's just like to add a little effect of, you know, it's like ingrown hair. So all this stuff here is gonna be picked by the subsurface scattering later, and then this is gonna look nice, you know. So this is kind of like one of the techniques I use in there. And then let's look at the veins now. So for the veins, we have two different things, right? One is gonna be the micro veins I showed you guys yesterday, which is like, not this one. Yeah, this one. So enter vein. That's the lightning that I found on the internet, like I told you. You can look like Google lightning photos and try to find the highest resolutions you can find. And if it's like a kind of like a super black sky with a high contrast lightning, you can actually, you know, make an alpha out of it like in Photoshop. So I'm gonna be using this one here just to create some of those micro veins around the face. And then I'm not gonna use add, just like you're gonna use the RGB. And let's pick a color that's a little bit more on the saturated side. So red like that, and more towards the dark part of red here. And then for intensity, let's try something just so we can see first. Let's see what kind of result we get. So we're getting something like that, right? So it's kind of like a darkish red. I can actually make a little bit more saturated than that. So I'm gonna just bring it here, still on the dark side, and then maybe intensity a little bit higher. Yeah, something like that looks nice, right? So in his case, he has some very specific ones at the tip of his nose that are gonna be painting by hand, but I'm gonna use those ones here as fillers. So for example, towards the sides of the nose in here, normally you get those little guys happening like this. Those are tiny details that are gonna really help, you know, it's like if you look from a distance. So to make sure that they are not too repetitive, I can actually change angles and sizes and then make them blend together, right? So I'm gonna change positions just to get some of those guys here. And if it's too much, I can just like start removing some of them by painting some color in there. Let's get some of that. Different directions, slightly in different sizes. So a big one, let's see, something like that, crossing it over. That looks, it blends a little better. And then maybe some from the below here. Same here. Actually, the opposite side. And then, so those are just like fillers, just to get some detail in there. So instead of like painting, oh, I got some like kind of bleeding there. So let's go back and just paint a little bit. So let's get this color here. Just paint some of that stuff back. Maybe more intensity. Remove some of that from there. Okay. And then, so let's paint some like manually. For painting manually, I mean, like there's no secret, right? We're gonna just use our standard brush. You can pick alpha 39 like I normally like to use. Same for sculpting. I'm gonna crank it, stroke at lazy mouse 0.02 that I normally use. And then basically like using intensity, let's say maybe 8. Let's pick a slightly reddish color towards the dark again. Let's just experiment with it. Maybe it can have a little bit more intensity. So let's crank it to maybe like 13. So I'm gonna pick some of those very specific ones that he has and hit the reference in there, and they go even darker. So I'm gonna get darker and a little bit more on the purplish side. And I'm gonna do one here. So I'm gonna start sculpting something. Let's see, around, it's hard to tell where exactly it starts. It's around here. I'm gonna go slowly so I can actually try to see what's going on there. I'm gonna break it a little bit in there. And in this case here, I'm actually not using any modeling I'm doing it. It's like it's just the color, because they're not gonna be super pronounced, and it's like I'm kind of like showing off too much as surface. It's gonna be more like a detail itself, and this one becomes a little bit more. Again, like controlling my pressure, right? Like starting very faint and then getting a little bit stronger towards those areas and then fainting again. Break it up a little bit. And then there's so much variation I'm going to be adding on top of here that at the end is not going to, some of this stuff going to disappear, some are going to show up pretty good. So those are just like a few in there. So let's go back around here, and he has some very strong ones. And those ones are more like a little bit more towards the purple side. So let's get about here. And then let's just try to incorporate those around here. I'm going to start with a dot that he has a very strong one. Oops, what happened? ZBrush. ZBrush is doing that thing that shoots. Yeah, I hate this, man. And it's there like for 10 years now. It's like you're painting a certain angle, it just shoots across your model and fucks it up. It only happens with the lazy mouse, by the way. So in this case, I'm gonna turn off the lazy mouse.
Chris?
Yeah.
Just to recap, let me just ask you one thing. So what makes the skin looks desaturated and brighter? What are the factors that makes it look that way? The thinner it is, the more desaturated and brighter it will be.
No, I think it's first, like there's exposure to the sun, of course, right? So the melanin is going to be a little bit less than that. But what I was talking about, the saturation was more towards the trying to eliminate the subsurface scattering that's baked into the albedo color,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because for example, if you get like a light stage model that you have like the scan, right? And then you have like this set of textures that comes with the scan that matches everything. And then if you look at those textures, they're gonna have like basically like it's gonna be a representation of the skin, just less the specular. It's basically like you're gonna eliminate the specular from it. But in terms of the colors of the subdermal layers and everything's gonna be baked into it. So what I try to do in my is basically like eliminate that the saturation and re-add it with the subsurface scattering. Otherwise you get like a double transformation. You get like both in the albedo baked into it, and then plus the subsurface scattering itself. And then all of a sudden your model starts to get like very, very reddish and orange. So that's basically like the way I see it. It's kind of like almost like if you see someone like in a morgue, right? Like you look at the movie, someone in a morgue, which is like someone died like hours ago, and you see like the face gets almost like pale blue. It's because like the blood basically like vanishes from those areas, right? And then you start seeing a much more pale skin, because that's what the skin is. It's like something much more pale than what we see. It's just because you have all the subdermal layers, then it looks like a different thing, but it's not quite like that.
I noticed that this Ray Harryhausen model has a bright area on the top of the eyes, right? Of the nose and on the top of the mouth. But is it like a general rule of thumb? Does it used to be that it's common to be that way?
I don't know if it's I think like at least like with this kind of complexion, it's like the wider pale people, they have this tendency of getting all those areas when they get older much paler. It's like especially like the top of the lids and stuff like that. There's this it's weird. I observe them pretty much like a lot in this older people, but I'm not gonna say it's a rule. It's like it's something that I see a lot though. Yeah.
On the tip of the nose, it's I believe you mentioned it's because of that cartilage that we all have.
Yes.
So as the skin is really thin and it's on the top of
a cartilage, of a kind of bones, and the result is that it's more saturated.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. Yeah, I tried to actually imagine what's going on underneath the skin, but like I said, it's a very artistic approach, right? Maybe like if we do like a deep study about what's actually happening there, we can actually bring some more information to the light. But I try to actually emulate what I see, and that's about it. You know, it's like it's a lot of freedom, but yeah.
It's because you are keeping the reference on the second monitor,
Yes.
And you are simply referring to that. So if the photo is telling you to lead that way, right?
Yes, basically that's what I do. Yeah, and then of course, like from time to time, I switch pictures because some stuff is deceiving, right? Just like I said, like sometimes if you get like a scan with matching pictures and everything, you're gonna notice that. Oh man, I got lost here. I forgot what I was about to say. I think it was a lie. That's what that's what my mom used to say. Like if you forgot, it's because it was a lie. So sorry, guys. I was about to lie to you guys, and sorry. But I gotta remember soon.
We are in the illusionist business.
Yes, exactly. My mom was a funny lady, man. Like she had all those sayings, I was like, I miss her a lot. She died like I think it was like how many years ago? 23 years ago, she passed away.
My condolences.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, it's life, But yeah, I miss her. She was a funny lady. She was like I don't know, 4 feet tall. She was super tiny.
Grace.
Hey, hi.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. I was just wondering, like, when you were making the facial hair, the mustache and the beard.
Yeah.
Like, if he has gray hair on the top, he might have gray hair on the bottom, because I just noticed as well in my model in Picasso, I saw a close-up picture and I see like white hair.
Yeah, totally.
So,
yeah, that's why I'm not going like full on like black. It's like I'm kind of like keeping like in the gray levels in here, because it can go both ways. For example, let me show you this. Like this one here. Let's see. All my personal projects. Rick Baker. I mean, like anything here has room for improvement. So you guys feel free to do anything. But I'm gonna show you what I have as result for Rick Baker. When I was modeling that, I was thinking about that process as well. So let's show you this. Let's see, around. There's an old render I did that's just for his beard without the mustache. Let's see if I can find this one's here. So this was basically using the same process, right? So you can see I have like the stuff that was painted in. It's very faint because it's blending with the subsurface scattering. So it's like gray, right? So you see it right here? So this is like gray little colors right there, right? But then what you're seeing like as black is basically the actual groom on top of it. So that adds just an extra layer of complexity, like I said before. And then you can come with the groom, and then as you shave the groom, like I said before, you're gonna actually get something that looks more like. Man, I'm having a hard time controlling this. Let me see if it's a space bar. No, not this one. I'm trying to find the shortcuts. It's been a while since I used this program, but I used to actually see those images that not a lot of other programs open. But for example, like this one here, if I shave those guys right now, you're gonna be left with something like this. So you would have like some whites and some blacks in it, But everything that's painted in there is very faint, as you can tell, Yeah, and this it's a good example as well of the type of skin in here that was mentioned before. So you see like those lines that are going that direction using that little micro direction brush. And then, but you still can see the pores underneath, that's kind of cool in there. And then blended with the entire thing is going to be the peach fuzz. So you're going to see the peach fuzz around already picking up right here, in this area. So there's a lot of layers of stuff you can add to add more complexity. The peach fuzz looks very even in here. This is like a very early stage. And then I tweak like the size variations and everything. But it works fairly well, Yeah.
Great. Thank you
Sure.
for the answer.
No problem. And then we are back to this guy here, which is fairly like he's more like on the orange side of things, right? And then slightly we can actually start picking up like some pinks, for example. We already play with the blues, greens, yellows, oranges, reds. Let's do some pinks in here. So more towards magenta, and then a very light version of it, like almost towards yeah, more desaturated, something like that. So let's play with that. Let's get this brush. I have the skin color, and just gonna play with some of that. Just add some more light, and slightly to, oh, it's very saturated right now. So let's get come on, ZBrush, we can do it. Intensity 1 or 2, so 2. Let's try that. And just gonna bring up a little bit more whitish than that, and a little bit more reddish. So around here, just gonna lift some of those areas again with a very spotty kind of how do you call, like a spray brush, right? So let's do that and just try to bring a little bit more of those pinks up, blending with whatever I have in there already. This entire area here, you see like I painted this funny little vein there because that's kind of very specific in him, but everything I'm gonna be building lots of micro veins and spots around that spot. So it's gonna be more complex at the end, but I mean, like we're just spending, I don't know, like an hour on this. And as I talk and stop. If it was just like a continuous work, this would be quite fast to do. Could probably have the same stuff like in 20 minutes or something. And so let's see. And then the other thing I forgot to mention was those livery spots. So I have this other brush here that I use. Let's see if I can find it. Starting to get packed in here. I have to organize it. Let's see, skin nose, pore, polish paint, elastic. Let's try around here. Skin generic. Pimple, liver spots, this one. So I have this one here that's basically like this alpha that's in ZBrush already, which is, where is it? Right there, alpha 15, right? So that's the one just cranking the contrast of the alpha a little bit. So the contrast at 2.5 here. So going up a little bit. And then what this brush does, if I pick like a color like slightly towards red, orange, and maybe a little bit more like darker like that. So let's see. Yeah, almost like becoming a kind of like a brownish color. So let's try, let's just see what it does. Oh, not this. I think I forgot to save the actual spray. Yeah, so that one sometimes I use for the liver spots, but the thing is, like in the case of his face here, they are so specific in shape and sizes that I cannot use something like that because it would look a little bit too artificial, right? If I do something like that. So I can actually go more, you know, it's like and paint them manually. But if it's for something else, I mean, like I would use something like that. So for example, like I'm gonna go more towards red, a little bit lighter maybe. And then, you know, I can add this kind of effect on the sides here, just get a little bit of those spots in there. But, you know, without going too detailed just yet, and just go like more specific with the other ones. So I'm gonna add some of that as well around neck here. There's like some spots.
Chris, are you using HD geometry right now?
Yep, 35 million right there, look. This is all HD. Oops. Yeah. If I switch here, you can see like all the details are all there. And yeah, so comparing this one here to the other texture I had, you're gonna see there's a big difference. I saved like a buffer. Oh, I actually forgot to save the other model I had with the buffer, but it's okay. I can recover from another subtool later. But I had saved it before, but I think I closed ZBrush to start fresh for this class, so I can do that later. I'm getting old. And then let's get to this, let's see, the other brush I use for it. So the pimple we were already talking about. Let's see, skin color, let's go back to that. No, skin color spray 2, which one? I think is the same kind of stuff, like flow 0, placement. Okay, let's try that. Okay, so this one here, if I do carefully, So if I have like a flow at 0 in here, right? And scale at 1, placement you can actually increase if you want more spaced out, but I'm gonna use that one. This one, for example, I have to use very carefully because I'm gonna just add like very specific stuff. So for example, like I just click and pull, for example, in one specific spot, just like barely touch the surface and then let it go. So I can add like some spots in very specific areas without like adding the spray at full intensity, right? So for example, here around the neck, I can just add those little pimples. It's still a little bit too much. I think the spray is still too, it's repeating too much. So it's almost like at this point here, I can just like turn off the spray and just go for the, you know, the specifics. I think I'm gonna do that. So let's do specifics. And then instead of like using the focal length at 0, I'm using like minus 82. So I'm gonna bring even lower than that because I wanna make sure that the edges of it are very sharp. And because of that, I can get like stuff like, let's see if I get right here, I'm gonna find something in his face that's very specific. Let's try some of those dots around his nose here. So something like that, I can go intensity lower than that and get some bigger ones around here and around there. Actually not, let's switch more towards red and a little bit more pale than that, a little lighter than that. With that, and then around here, yeah, that looks better. Maybe less saturated than that. And around here, I can actually start blending some of those areas with the veins I just painted. So it basically becomes like underneath the skin is almost like you can see, it's almost like a little cluster of stuff that's actually the veins are on top of it. Especially like these guys here. I'm gonna start blending them more with like some underneath structures in here. And then trying to find, you know, like areas I can paint, let's see, darker. So around here, he has a big area of like variation of like concentration of stuff. And then I can add like, after that, I can come up with more saturation. For example, if I have something a little bit more faint like that, a little bit more pale, right? I can come with a more saturated color, more towards red right here. And just like add right there in the middle of those little intersections, just to add some more complexity to those varicose veins, right? Same around here. And then again, change like sizes, right? Make it bigger. Get some of that as well. And then slowly you can start building up all the complexity of the skin by adding those type of things. So for tonight, I mean, like this is the current stage of the entire thing. So I have like plenty of things that I spoke about. It's all about variations. I think I gave you all the settings for the brushes if you want to try. But at the end of the day, it's just like, it's going to be a repetition of all this process, just observing my reference, trying to capture like the lighter colors, the darker colors. If at any time you get in trouble with any of the, you know, something is like the colors are too different between each other, it's like there's a high contrast, you can always go back, right? Like sample like a generic place in color here and just recover some of that color. And then at the end of the day, it's going to be like matching your reference. Don't worry too much about having the color matching completely because we're going to be removing the subsurface effect in the shader later on. So I think that's it for today. I mean, like this week is going to be pretty back to back with you know, it's like yesterday was pretty intense with the eyes. Today was going to be texturing, and then tomorrow is going to be grooming. So so when the weekend comes by, you guys going to have plenty of different things to try. You know, of course, if you want. Because we don't have like assignments, but I sure gonna be working on it because I want to finish this model in a week and a half or 2 weeks. So I'm gonna be obsessing about it. So thanks a lot, guys, for coming again, and keep up the great work. I'm gonna be commenting on our group every time I can. Sometimes I take some breaks, but yeah, keep posting stuff and sharing your work and commenting on each other's work. You know, it's like you're all really good artists and very talented, you know. It's like, so I'm pretty sure the other ones appreciate when you comment on their stuff as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Have a great one.
Chris.
Valeu, Cris. Abraço.
Valeu.
Thank you.
Right.